coming up too.
Oh, good. Would it be possible for, I know an incredible job you guys have done at answering questions. Would it be possible to take it as a question from me saying, why was the forest overlay
Yes.
eliminated?
Yes, I will do that. And that may be in there, but I will find that out.
Okay,
And
I haven't.
see that in the question right now. And Bill has his hand up and may be able to answer that.
I was just going to offer, Alan, I'd be happy to communicate with you offline about, you know, the forest core overlay and what went into deciding to not have that. We can also post that as a written answer on the zoning commission webpage. So we'll take that and condense information down. But yeah, a lot went into that decision. So
I imagine it did. And so that would be great because it would be nice to have it in writing there, because especially for the no zoning to show, you know, some of the changes that have taken place in the drafts. So.
okay, to close the loop and to make sure things don't fall through the whatever, just send a quick email to Jean, the zoning commission, saying, yeah, I heard the zoning forest core overlay was eliminated. Why was that?
Okay.
I theoretically have that, but one never knows. By tomorrow morning, anything could happen.
I know.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Yes?
I'd just like to ask a quick question about the procedure on it. Ellen implied that there is a newer draft version on the website. Is that true?
No, there isn't a newer draft version on the website. She was reading what's there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's why I was unaware that the forest overlay had changed.
I hope if we finish Article 3 tonight, it will be up very soon. The new draft.
Are you going to release a draft of the entire thing or just as you go?
As we go, we're gonna, because we, I will say right now that we hope to have a public information meeting on the sections we have done, which will be Articles 1, 2, and 3, and the terms, the definitions, because you really don't understand what you're talking about unless you actually see the definitions. And then we would have a public information meeting on that section.
Thank you.
And that will be up for at least 2 weeks before we have the public information meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anybody else's hand up. So hearing none, we are going to move on to, it is now 7:23, the approval of the minutes of the March 29th meeting. Would someone like to move those?
Ernie will move those.
Thank you, Ernie. And I see Michelle's hand up, who is seconding. And is there any comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. Any opposed? There we are. Okay. The town council report, Tim Murray.
Hi, everybody. The town board held its April business meeting last night. One of the agenda items was beginning preliminary discussion of the expiration of the moratorium, which is on August 1st. This was just a preliminary discussion, but there were some mixed feelings expressed on the board about extending it, or perhaps extending it in different ways. Another thing that came up in that context that didn't get much discussion, but is there in the periphery, is what the status would be of the revised site plan law that was articulated by the task force, and which is now incorporated in the zoning law. So that's really about all I have to report.
Thank you, Tim. So thinking about that, if we finish, Article 3 soon, we would be moving on to Article 4, development standards, Article 5, supplementary standards, and Article 6, the site plan review. So most of Article 5 and Article 6, I think it's all of Article 5 except for Section 5.5, the additional standards for specific uses, and Article 6 in the first draft, are essentially what came from the task force. That's right? Those of you who served on the task force, I know Barbara did. That's,
Michelle did as well.
so that's what came in. And then Nan, as I understand it, added the additional standards for specific uses. So, but that task force report, the town board hasn't really looked at yet, nor has the review commission, the site plan review group, I think.
The review board.
Review board. So I've been thinking that perhaps what we should do is ask the review board to look at it as we're getting into it, to see if they have any comments about that, you know, within the next month, so that they can give us back some comments as we're beginning to go through. Bill, I see your hand up.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to chip in when you finished whatever you're talking about. Sorry.
I was done.
Okay. Yeah, I like that idea of you know, sending in and trying to get some feedback from the review board. And I would actually extend that potentially we might have the current chair and a couple past chairs of the review board come in and with us sit down with us for an hour to talk about how site plan has kind of worked in Caroline. So we have a better sense of that as we then look at that section. So that's not necessary, but I think that might be helpful as well. But certainly any formal comments the review board wants to make on that would be great.
I think that would be really very helpful because, you know, personally, I've never been through site plan review and I don't know how many of us have. I see Barbara's hand up.
Yeah, just in addition to having them take a look at the content of the draft language, it could be useful to give them the version that is the Google Doc that has a number of zoning commission comments on it. Because that's, the task force completed that, but not necessarily in the context of information that's available currently. And so it may be useful for the review board to see some of the comments or see all the comments that some members of the zoning commission at least have made on those chapters as they think about their own comments in the context of this being included in a potential zoning law.
I think that's great. And I like that idea a lot. We could absolutely do that. And Bruce serves on the review.
Yeah,
So what's
Bill,
your thought?
I talked to Craig about this and, he would be like more knowledgeable because we really haven't had much to do. But one of his main comments was that for us, like site plan, what we would do is look at the situation and give recommendations. And then,
Yes.
and then let them come back and tell us, what was going to go on after that or what they would like to do. So, but Craig, I'm sure could fill you in much better because he was on the review board way before I was, or Don. And,
Okay. And I think the other people I looked today, it's Susan Pierce Kelling, Don Barber, Craig, who else? Ellen Harrison. Ellen Harrison. That's right. So good. I will get in touch with Craig and ask that happen and get him off the, both documents, the original and what we have written up a little bit. Okay. Before we get into this Article 3 again, Nan, do you have anything you want to tell us?
No, nothing in particular. We've been working on additional questions and I've updated definitions so they're ready for the zoning commission's discussion. So that's it.
Okay, let us have at it then. So Bill and Michelle, do you want to take us to where we were at the end of the last meeting?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Too bad I forgot that I should set that up. So let me open up the dimensions table while someone enables me to share my screen and we'll get to it.
Okay, the AV guy is doing that, better known as the town supervisor.
Yeah, all right, let's see now.
I have to get him a new nameplate that says AV guy.
Sounds good.
You are now a co-host. Ta-da.
It's happening.
All right, and so let's get rid of that. Okay, Microsoft was trying to make me do something. I think I beat it in a submission, so let me now.
There are days I just want to scream at Microsoft, and I actually do scream at Microsoft.
Okay, so there we go. All right, so this is the dimensions table. I think we were working on this,
Yep,
and I think we talked about those setbacks, building height. So we probably need to revisit the building height thing,
Yep, I
and that's
think-
pretty much.
let me tell you what the fire department said. So I've, Ernie, did the fire department from Brookendale get in touch with you?
I sent that email out, which I think you all saw, and I have not had a response.
Okay, basically what I heard from Speedsville was, yes, we can generally deal with a 3-story fire. Our trucks will go to just about 240, our ladders will go to just about 40 feet. But anything over that we would have to call in people from nearby fire companies. Well, what is that town? Weltonville? Well, down,
Waltonville.
exactly, that town, yeah. And Dryden, who have, I guess, longer ladders, and that this was, of course, just for residential buildings, and we said, yes, that's what we're talking about. And Brookendale basically said pretty much the same thing, but Ernie sent a more detailed thing to them, and we just haven't heard back again yet. But that's sort of where we are.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Well, in that, they would not use a ladder for fighting a fire so much as a rescue operation. 40 feet just needs to get you to the window, not to the peak of the building. So I think if they have the capability to use a 40-foot ladder, sure seems to me that, a 40-foot maximum height limit would be okay.
Yeah, I think so too. And anybody else?
Yeah, I believe we agreed upon that last meeting.
I
we
would
said-
move that, I'm
we
going to
said
make a
that-
motion that we take the 40 feet and put that in the document for now. And if somebody wants to suggest otherwise, so be it.
Okay,
Move on.
all in favor? Say aye, because I can't see your faces.
Aye.
Aye,
Hi.
aye.
Thanks. That passes.
All right, so the next line is maximum lot coverage, and I have to admit, I've been a bad boy. Other things got on my plate, and so I forgot to do what the note says, which is we're supposed to do more research on lot coverage and what we think it looks like. So at any rate, lot coverage was a number we also weren't sure where we came out.
Nan, as I recollect, these were kind of based on what is happening now. Is that correct?
No, I think what's happening now is was more fed into more of the lot sizes and setbacks. I think these numbers are generally, I say generally accepted as commercial areas and hamlet areas are allowed to have more lot coverage. They're denser areas, more developed areas. In areas that are out in rural areas are generally 20%. Some places that have watershed rules and regulations, which are not being proposed here, but like if you look at guidance from the New York Rural Water Association, they often will recommend a 15% lot coverage where there's sensitive recharge areas for aquifers. So 20%, I think these are more just generally accepted standards. They certainly could be changed. one way or the other. But they're fairly common to be around where they, that's why I set them. They're generally, those are about where they're at.
Okay. I drove around and sort of looked at these a little bit and they seemed okay to me. I think I hear Ernie.
My comment would be that, in areas where there are much smaller lot sizes, you may find that, even 50% is being kind of regularly exceeded when you have a house and driveway and, the garage and the barn in the back and the swimming pool or whatever else you have out there. So, I don't want to object to this in principle. I think that, these are probably a good starting point for this, but recognize that this will be something that will probably come up for variance hearings from time to time, particularly on those small lots.
Okay. Well, let's see when we bring this to people, what they say, and we can come back and adjust. And as you say, you are always eligible to apply for a variance if the law was passed. Does that seem, Barb, I think you said this?
Barb, yeah.
Barb.
Yeah, thank you. I'll make a motion that in Hamlet, Caroline Center, Hamlet, Speedsville, and well, at least those two, Caroline Center and Speedsville, that we increase those to 50 to make them more similar to Slaterville Springs and West Slaterville, which has kind of been the way that we've been considering those hamlets throughout.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
So we're gonna leave Hamlet Bessemer as 20.
Unless you
Yes.
make a different motion, yeah.
Okay, I hear that and I have a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I would think
Uh,
maybe we should think about making Hamlet Bessemer the same. Just because they have houses, garages, same type of situation. And I also have a question about the ag rural district. 20%, do we have any control over the ag?
So, and I think that in terms of ag buildings, like on a farm, the answer is no, but I'll let Nan confirm that. But again, the ag rural district has a lot of non-farm properties. So this would mostly pertain to residential structures and stuff, a lot of the other properties out there. I was actually going to speak. So, I'm not going to fight if we want to make Caroline Center and Speedsville 50. My motion would have been that we say not applicable in everything but the commercial district. And we make a limit there. But at any rate, it might be something in ordering with tonight. It doesn't seem to me that we really have a lot of reason to limit the lot coverage. Again, I'm looking for, and maybe I'm missing it, I'm looking for the public good, the public safety issue. What is it besides just, oh, it looks nice to limit lot coverage? And there may be a good reason in terms of habitat or something. So someone argue me why we should have any number there whatsoever outside the commercial district.
Barb?
I mean, just pipe in on the question that Bruce asked. This does not apply to agricultural buildings, farm operations. And the reason that we have lot coverage is not necessarily open space, but it is one of the things that influences runoff and water quality. So it's a bottom line of water quality issue. Because where like in a commercial district, you have more than an acre of development, that's going to be subject to New York State stormwater pollution prevention rules. They're going to have built-in stormwater facilities. So a higher pervious surface is allowable because they engineer how to handle the stormwater. In other areas where you're putting a house or even, a multifamily dwelling, if you're not disturbing an acre or more of land, then there is no other engineered requirement for stormwater. So I would say that the maximum lot coverage, while it certainly influences open space, it's really oriented towards water quality.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak?
I will make one other point, just to kind of give everybody kind of a heads up on numbers. A 1 acre lot is 42,000 feet plus or minus. So a 20% lot area allowance would give you over 8,000 square feet of coverage, which, you know, if it's a house and a garage and some driveway, you know, that's a big house for an acre lot.
Right.
Now, if this 1/4 acre lot, that's now much smaller, and so that's, you know, the reason there should be some accommodation for those areas where smaller lots exist. I don't know that the Bessemer Hamlet has many, if any, lots that are, you know, under an acre. But I think there's a lot of wisdom in what Bill's saying, that you know, there's probably not a lot of reason to you know, push this for other than concerns about water quality. So
Okay, hearing this, I'm gonna say that we have an amendment on the table that has been offered by Bruce. I don't have a second to that amendment, and that amendment would be to make Hamlet, Bessemer, Brooktondale also 50. Do I have a second for that?
You can take that away because I'm now kind of leaning toward what Bill had to say also.
Okay, so we have moved away from that. We have an amendment on the floor now. That's Barbara's amendment to increase the Hamlet Caroline Center and Hamlet Speedsville to 50%. And all in favor of that, please say aye.
I,
I don't care.
Aye.
I'm
So
gonna
that
go
was,
with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Like I said, at some point, maybe we'll just X them all out, but there's no reason not to go to 50.
okay, so I think I heard 4 ayes. Any nays? Okay, so that amendment passes, and we're taking Hamlet Caroline Center and Speedsville to 50%. And leaving Bessemer Brooktondale at 35. So there are 50s and the others are 35s.
No, aren't they 25?
Yeah, I'm on the wrong line because I'm an idiot. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Bill, can you just go back to the building height? I mean, you've got the master table here.
Oh,
Can
you're
you
right,
make those
sorry.
40.
You are right. Sorry. Thank you. Someone was asleep on the switch earlier. All right, there we go.
Okay, and then we have the last line, maximum building footprint of commercial structures. And I think the last time we talked about this, Bill, you had said that you wanted to perhaps increase commercial to 10,000 square feet. Is that right?
Well, I had 3 proposed motions, which we haven't officially read or seconded or anything yet. And one of the motions was contradictory because I both went up and down because I honestly didn't know. I thought we should have some discussion of the intent and character, et cetera. The green here means that we had some comments, and I forgot to grab those sheets today, but basically there were a number of folks that suggested that these numbers were too small in general. I don't think there were any comments that said those numbers are too big. But at any rate, I will just, here's the motions that I have, and then we can take them up one by one, or if anybody else has other motions. But in terms of the commercial area, and again, I don't know why I was so unprepared tonight, but I sent out the table of actual, commercial building sizes in the town. And a lot of the facilities we have in this commercial zone are quite a bit larger than 5,000 square feet. And since we're allowing even 5,000 square feet over here in Slaterville Springs, I'm really thinking of this commercial area as the place in town where we feel okay with really big things going. And so my motion is to increase this 5,000 square feet in the commercial district, or we call it the large commercial district, or whatever we want to call it, to something like 10,000. So that's my motion, and we can compromise on some different number or leave it at 5,000. My motion is to make 5,000, 10,000 instead. The other motions had to do with the ag rural area. I think it takes some discussion, but again, there are some existing uses in the ag rural area that are larger. Some of them, if they qualify as home businesses, home occupations, this size limit doesn't matter. I think that on some of those, whether they are home occupations is very debatable, but luckily that is not our call. It would be the review board's call come down the line. But there's no reason something like Gaggle, I think, which could not possibly fit in 1,500 square feet, would actually be considered a home occupation. But that's, again, I don't want to jump down a different rabbit hole. But at any rate, the question is, do we want to think of the ag rural district as a place, because properties are generally large, where it's okay for a few large uses to be situated, and we're controlling it by the types of uses we're allowing there rather than the size? Like, what if a large animal vet wanted to be out in the ag rural area somewhere? 1,500 square feet might indeed not make that feasible. So that's the reason for saying maybe that should be 3,000 or even 5,000 square feet in the ag rural. And lastly, the Brookendale outer area, we still haven't quite decided if we're going to combine these the two things into one. But I don't know. Again, outer Brookendale is a little bit less tightly spaced than the center of Brookendale, so maybe this should be a little bit larger. If it's even a little bit bigger, then some of the existing businesses there will fit without being grandfathered. But on the other hand, there's a lot of houses out there. So the other side of me says, let's make that a little bit smaller. And I think that's where I'm tending to lean, is actually this 3,000 should be 2,000. So the three motions are to increase commercial from 5,000 to 10,000, ag rural from 1,500 to something larger, 3,000 to 5,000, and Brookendale outer to something a bit smaller, say 2,000. And we can take them at one, see if there's any seconds or other, what we want to do.
Yes, so does anyone want to second one or all of those, and then we will discuss?
I have a discussion about the outer hamlet of Brookendale. I believe it either should stay there or be larger.
Well, we don't need to discuss until someone seconds the motion. And if no one's going to second any of these things, it could make the meeting a lot shorter.
Well, I have a clarifying question before I can decide if I want a second or not.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Barb, and then we'll come back to Bruce, and maybe he'll make it a clarifying question. Go ahead.
Okay, so my clarifying question has to do with the definition of maximum building footprint of commercial structure. That implies one structure. So that implies that this is the maximum footprint that a single structure could be on this property. But what I'm wondering about is, could there be multiple structures of 10,000 square feet in the commercial district, as long as, and with Bill's proposal, as long as the total coverage, lot coverage, stays under 60%, which is the line above. So my question is this the maximum building footprint of each commercial structure on a parcel, or of the total number of commercial structures on the parcel?
Let us go to Nan. Nan?
I think the intent, I mean, you could create a policy to go either way. Some places do it, for the whole parcel, but I think the intent, when I was thinking through this, was per building.
Okay,
Per building.
that changes everything.
Yeah, so I think you bring up an excellent point, and I think you have to decide what way you want to go. Do you want it to be, again, that's where the lot coverage plays a really important role. I mean, does it matter to you whether you have, one of the reasons for having a maximum building footprint is to control the scale of the building. So you can have a development that is made up of multiple smaller buildings versus one very big, large building. So I think you bring up an excellent point that you need to decide is what's the policy that you want to go with, what direction you want to go with.
And I'll just jump in again on this then. This then ties into, I believe it's section 5 or article 5, which talks about design guidelines, because one of the issues coming out of the task force that is now incorporated in the draft of article 5 is that there is a provision that large structures, and I don't remember the square footage, but large structures need to be broken up into individual masses, separate masses. So like, for example, you couldn't have a 10,000 square foot single mass, but you could be able to have 3 or 4 structures that of separate masses, but that add up to that amount. So given that, I think we need to take a look at, we can do whatever we want with this line right now, with the idea that we may need to come back and revise it once we get into Article 5. Or revise Article 5. But given all this, I am not inclined to second Bill's motion.
Okay.
And that's right. And I can now talk also. So I have found, and Barb said exactly what I was about to say. So other than the not seconding my motion part, but at any rate, the section is 5.2.4. I found it just now, and it says buildings with footprints larger than 1,500 square feet shall be designed as a series of smaller masses or design components or articulated to appear as multiple buildings with offsets. So there are design standards that say any large building has to actually look like a bunch of smaller buildings. If it is multiple buildings on a parcel, I'm actually fine and would actually withdraw the motions other than possibly the one in the ag zone. And maybe also the one in Brookendale Outer to make that smaller, but I don't need to increase the, I no longer see the need. If indeed there can be several different 5,000 square foot buildings, which is exactly what Carson has, for example.
Right.
Yeah, I don't see any reason to increase that number. So I withdraw that motion. I think we should still discuss the ag rural district. Though again, if there can be multiple 1,500 square foot buildings, maybe that's okay. So I'm going to leave that motion on the table. And I will also leave a motion on the table to reduce the outer Brookendale one down to 2,000 square feet.
Okay, so let's go to the commercial one. The ag rural one. Does anyone want to second that?
Can you restate the motion, please?
The motion is to make it bigger. More specifically, I hadn't really decided. I said sort of like somewhere like 3,000 or 5,000. So that was pending discussion of the zoning commission. That is, if people had some expert wisdom, then we could do that. But at any rate, I thought potentially, again, I was thinking there was a limit of the total set of commercial structures could only be 1,500 square feet. And that just felt too limiting for the ag rural district. For me, to me, given that that's not the case, I would need someone like Ernie who says, oh yeah, but if you want to build a building, a couple thousand square feet, maybe is a good size for out there. I don't know.
Okay.
Well, let me just, I just want to make this clear. So we are now going to use, we need to revise the dimension column. So it says maximum building footprint of each commercial structure.
Yep,
Yeah.
good.
Or of a single commercial structure. If that's what we're talking about, let's make that clear.
I like that. Yep.
Okay, so and then kind of the question comes up is like, okay, what constitutes separate structures here? I mean, there's a lot of things that don't operate very well if they aren't connected. But being 2 feet apart is a lot different than being 200 feet apart. So I'm kind of getting into the nuances here, but I think it's important that we kind of think that through a little bit.
Anyone want to speak?
I don't, and maybe Nan can chip in. I think possibly that's a review board function that, looking at the site plan, and they could discuss whether, hey, you've got, you're saying these are two separate buildings, but they're only 6 inches apart. You really got one building here. You got to do something to separate them more. I mean, I don't know if that's more appropriate as a review board function or not. So I'll, that's my 2 cents.
Or let me suggest an alternative approach. An alternative approach would be to make the limit based on all of the buildings on the property. And then in the design review guidelines say that a building over 5,000 square feet or whatever has to be divided into 2,500 square foot chunks, or some sort of language like that, that's more sliding scale to reflect the massiveness of the construction. You catch my drift there? I'm not sure if I'm being clear.
And I think, either approach, either by stating it for the maximum size of an individual, or the total footprint allowed on the parcel.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding that, because we have maximum lot coverage. So, you don't want to have, like maximum 5,000 square foot building on a 1 acre property, the same as a maximum 5,000 square foot on a 10 acre property. I mean, that to me doesn't make any sense.
As long as they're under 60% of coverage, they meet the requirements.
Not if we're saying that it's a maximum total. I thought you were suggesting change this to a maximum total of all buildings.
Well, that would be one approach. I mean, I think, you can either make the number bigger, or you can just say, and then say it's the total number, or you can just say, well, it's individual buildings, and then there's seemingly no limit on how, then the limit is the lot coverage, I guess.
Yeah, but Ernie, help me understand. I'm sorry, I'm being very dense, I guess, tonight.
I'm not being
But
very
I
clear.
don't understand how, I mean, maximum lot coverage is a percent. So the
Right.
size of your building, or the total square footage covered by all of your buildings would wax and wane depending on your parcel size. But if we set a maximum combined footprint for a parcel, that doesn't make sense to me, because the parcel size can vary. And so I don't see why a maximum combined building footprint for a small parcel would be the same as for a large parcel.
Well, the smaller parcel couldn't build that large a building if it exceeded the lot coverage requirement.
Right, but okay, so let's say a 3 acre parcel versus a 100 acre parcel. You're still going to limit the buildings on that to the same square footage?
Well, that's kind of that's kind of what we've got going here. I mean, it's very true that, lots come in all different sizes, and therefore, if somebody just decides to have this huge lot, but only develop a very small part of it, should they be treated any differently than somebody who has the small part only and wants to do the same thing?
Again, I'm not catching that reasoning, how that's better than going with percentage of parcel.
I mean, I just don't, I'm having a hard time understanding your point, I guess.
Well, so let me weigh in here. I think the answer to you, Barb, is yes. So I think the rationale behind, I mean, we could go with indeed building footprint of the sum of the commercial structures. And in that case, the function of the total size would essentially be limit the size of the enterprise, which is, I think, a reasonable goal for the town. We maybe don't want some huge warehouse moving into town that's 50,000 square feet, even if they buy 10 acres of land and are under the lot coverage. So I think there's a function, even if we say total amount of commercial building space, to having a number here, and a separate number, which is the lot coverage, because that does something for, as Naz pointed out, not just open space, but water runoff and that kind of stuff. So I do see the two functioning a little bit differently, and a rationale for either way we specify the building size number, that it's okay given varying lot sizes. But so that's my take on it.
And I
Okay.
guess if the reason for maintaining smaller, footprints is an aesthetic one, then the idea that we, deal with the aesthetics in the, design guidelines, makes
Yeah.
more sense, and just
I,
use this row as a way to limit the total development on that lot.
Yeah.
So.
But again,
you know,
if we leave it as we have it now, 60% lot coverage, and the footprint of a single building is 5,000, say. And yes, if the design guidelines stay the way they are, they have to break that 5,000 to make it look a little more like a few small buildings. Someone who bought 50 acres of land could put an awful lot of commercial structures on there, which maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's not a good thing, but that's essentially the choice we're facing here. That, is this town wanting that kind of development or not? And what I had been getting as feedback to the planning board was generally small businesses were preferred. And so a lot of stuff has been oriented towards encouraging small business, not, whatever, someone coming in to build a warehouse as a transfer station for, Walmart or whoever. So I
Okay.
guess I'm a little uncomfortable with this actually only applying to one building and not saying anything about the total sum of the buildings.
Well, you could do it both ways. You could limit, or you could have a regulation that has a maximum building footprint of a single building. And you could say at the same time that the total commercial square footage of a lot would be, that's kind of what you get at, there's an interplay between lot coverage, which also includes driveway and parking lot and things like that. But, so you could have a total square footage so that they work together. But yeah, you run the risk of a very large parcel have 50,000 square foot of commercial development in 5,000 square foot chunks, which that could happen.
Well, let me understand something. The reason we have this line at all kind of stems from the concern about big box or, formula businesses and all of that. Because this is not a common thing in zoning ordinances that I've run across.
Yeah, it maybe not with the ones that you work with, but it is very common. There's lots of communities that are concerned about scale and intensity. Not that a small building can't have a lot of intensity, but all taken kind of together, along with the coverage, the height, and all of these things. We're trying to basically create a density for commercial development. So I think it's not just aesthetics. It's really getting at scale and intensity. Aesthetics is certainly part of it, but it's not just that.
Well, I guess my take then would be to go back to Bill's first motion, which was to make all these bigger, make that refer to the total development on the lot, and then deal with building massing in the guidelines.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to second Bill's first motion, I guess.
Oh, thank God.
Well, so what
I
we
kept
do,
thinking we don't have a second.
well, so we need to decide whether we want this to be this, let's talk about total or talk about single. I think we obviously have to decide, or we could do what Nan suggested, is to add a row. And that row is the total, and this row is the single. And
Okay, let's say that this is each, because that's what we've written in there now, single. And Bill, since you are the originator of this motion, make a decision between 3 and 5K.
okay, all right. So we're talking for a single commercial structure. Are you talking about the commercial zone now or the ag district?
I'm talking about the ag district.
Okay, all right. And just for background for me, are you then thinking we would then move on to entertain a separate line that would be the sum of the
Indeed.
commercial?
I am indeed.
Okay. All right, all right. So, because I was thinking in my 3 to 5,000 that that was the total size of the enterprise. So, and anyone know, I mean, how big a rural barn tends to be, right? You know, I feel like I'm a little flying blind. I could see going, say, to 2,000 here in the understanding that the next line is going to say they could have a total of something like 6,000 square feet or, you know, 4,000 square feet. So I'm flailing. What if I say 2,000 here?
But
Then
just
I
to be
would-
clear, ag structures don't pertain here, right?
Correct.
They're not ag structures. They're structures that are commercial in the ag district, but not ag. In the ag rural district. Like if I wanted to build one where I live. A bad idea, but you know,
1,500 square feet is a small house, 30 by 50,
right.
you know, small
That's my house,
3-bedroom. You know, no one buys houses that small anymore.
So let's say, so Bill, you're saying 2,000? And, but your
Going
second,
once.
your second is Ernie, I think. And Ernie, tell me what you think. Give me a number.
But this is for the single
It's
structure.
single. Yes,
I think in the ag rural district, we can actually make this bigger. I really don't think that, I mean, the types of businesses that are going to, tend to accrue out here in the country are ones that kind of need the land as opposed to the highway access.
I'm thinking about what Will always talked about on Mid-Aug, for instance.
Yeah, for instance.
A lot of buildings on a big parcel.
Yeah, and so, and I don't know that big buildings are out of character necessarily with, the rural landscape. So I would tend to make that number bigger.
Am I hearing 3,000?
Yes, I'll bid 3,000.
Okay.
I
Okay.
will too. I will too.
Great, so we've got 3,000. Well, everyone who thinks that's fine at this point, say yes.
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 Sure.
Fabulous. And we're just gonna finish this single line and then go on to the idea about how many you could have on a lot. So
Good.
as I understand, we're going over to commercial, where Bill's suggestion was at first to move the 5,000 to 10,000, but now I think what I heard was he thinks 5,000 is fine when it's a single building. Is that correct, Bill?
Yeah, and again, if anyone has the table handy that I had done before, I mean, if you looked at like the individual buildings of the self-storage place, I think they're in the 4,000 to 5,000 range. I'm not sure.
Yes,
So I would think that then that number is fine.
okay. So are we
For the
happy
types
then?
of businesses we tend to have in Caroline that in general we're trying to support, right? Yeah. So.
Okay, so with that, are we happy with the rest of that line?
How do people feel about Brooktondale Outer? I guess it wasn't, let's officially, I will formally propose changing that from 3,000 to 2,000, just to see if I have any takers so we can get a debate going. That's
I
the
second
motion.
that.
Okay, we have a second for the motion.
Okay, so
Can
that's,
before we pass that, can I ask a question?
yes,
Refresh me, Bill. I don't have the map in front of me. Outer
Yeah.
Brooktondale is, where
Right.
is it on the map?
Okay, so Center Brooktondale is the center part that goes basically from the post office, sort of almost to the community center, I think, without that in front of me either. So Outer Brooktondale is the wider part. So if you start at the post office and head towards Route 79, it's all of that out to Mid-Aug Road. Right around Mid-Aug Road and also
Okay.
Beesimer Road is the junction between that and the Beesimer Hamlet. Going the
Oh,
other
okay.
way, it goes not quite all the way to the Brooktondale Volunteer Fire Station.
okay.
Oh,
And
so-
your,
So outer is on both sides of center.
Yes, yes, it is indeed like an outer donut around the central section of Brooktondale.
Because
And-
I see going towards 79, those figures are fine. But I see going the other direction where the maximum lot coverage should be 50 and should stay at 3,000. And I believe going the other way, it would be proper to lower it and to stay at 25.
All right, so I am turned around and confused, so I'm gonna assume other folks on the zoning commission might be as well. When you say this way and the other way, remind me, so which way,
From
which
Brookton,
end of it,
from the post office towards the town barns,
right?
I would
Okay,
feel should be 50 for maximum lot coverage and stay at 3,000. And from the post office towards 79, I would agree should stay at 25 and maybe 2,000 square feet.
I don't
Okay.
understand how you can do that. I mean,
Well, we'd have to change the zone, we'd have to make it two different pieces, we can't. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if you look at it,
But I
they
get-
definitely are two completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, either that or we could go, like I say, and like you had discussed, possibly combining them, which probably would screw things up too. So I just see them as
Yeah.
two completely different areas.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I guess what I would, I mean, partly in the interest of getting through this and also hearing some more community views, I'm tending to say, okay, we can keep the two parts of Brookendale separate for this iteration of public information and then go further. Your idea of the left and right parts, basically the east and west parts being different. Yeah, I think you're right about that. I don't know if I'm ready to move to make a change. That would then make Brookendale 3 different pieces on the zoning map, and that already seems way too complicated with 2 pieces. So yeah, I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, but I guess I'm not ready to break that into 2 pieces personally.
So you're not accepting that as an amendment to your.
Yeah, it's not a friendly amendment, let's put it that way, yeah, as they call it in parliamentary parlance.
Exactly. So I think that Barb seconded your motion about this, but I'm not positive.
I think I did too.
So hearing that, does anyone else want to discuss that? And if not, I'm going to take a vote on that. Bill, repeat what you had to say.
Okay, so the motion is to decrease in what we are currently designating as the hamlet of Outer Brookendale, to decrease the maximum building footprint of a single commercial structure from 3,000 down to 2,000 square feet.
Okay. And I have a second, and I didn't hear any more discussion. All in favor of that, say aye.
I,
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Nay,
Okay,
didn't we just change that to 3,000 square feet last meeting?
No,
no,
it's been 3,000 all along.
yeah,
How come
Okay.
it's in red?
Started
Because it
talking
got
about
transferred, it was in red, we talked about also, this used to be Beesimer, and so when Beesimer Brookendale got split into Outer Brookendale, we just copied the 3,000 from Brookendale Center into there, and we never really discussed it, so that's why it was red. As
Really?
opposed to making it the 1,500 that it would have been when it was part of Beesimer.
Okay, so I'm accepting that as a majority passed it, and we're gonna put this into the second draft, and then we can change it again if we get comment upon it.
Are we discussing any of these other numbers?
No one has.
Well, I guess I would just make a motion that we take the other 1,500 numbers and turn them all into 2,000 numbers.
Can I,
Hamlet,
do I have a second
Beesimer.
for that?
And the reason is that it's a 1,500 square feet is a very small building. You can hardly even build a restaurant, a viable restaurant in that kind of square footage. And it just seems overly restrictive and no real good reason why it should be any different from Brookendale.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay.
Any-
As
Go ahead.
so as part of that, I would like just Nan to weigh in if she would, on Ernie's declaration that 1,500 square feet is tiny and you couldn't do a restaurant in it. Because I do know, yes, it's certain types of businesses operate at 1,000 square feet, but I understand that a restaurant might not be able to. So does Nan have any insight for us on the size? And you can pass, Nan. I don't want to put you on the spot too much.
Yeah, no, I mean, some of the franchise businesses are very small buildings. you know, and I know that you have other discussions to come still on the language for franchise design standards in buildings, but you know, you look at Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, those are all very small buildings.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
mean,
What? So, you know, I think that those were, again, chosen not with any particular use, a restaurant or an office or whatever in mind, but more in thinking about what is the scale of structures that would fit in with perpetuating and maintaining the character that you have and that you desire. That's in my opinion where these numbers ought to be.
Okay. I have that motion.
I have just a comment.
And
just
I
to
do as
put-
well.
Just to put things in context, as an example, so one of the suggestions here, motion is raising Speedsville, for example, from 1,500 to 2,000. So currently in Speedsville is Oz Body Works, which has 2 buildings, and the total of those 2 buildings is 4,500 square feet. So roughly that corresponds to, you know, to basically what's being proposed here as the change. And to me, when I drive by Oz Body Works, that seems like it's totally appropriate for Speedsville. So I'd like to speak in favor of the proposed change.
Thank you.
Right.
I think I saw Bill's hand up
Yeah.
again.
Right, and the only thing I wanted to point out, and again, that maybe it's relevant to some businesses like a Body Works has to work on one floor or maybe in a restaurant, but remember, these are footprints. So if you've got a 2-story structure, 1,500 square feet, you've got 3,000 square feet. Like, so they're in some sense not as small as they look. That's only if you only had a 1-story operation. So there are ways to get around that. But anyway, I don't have strong feelings on the number, so that's all I'll say.
Okay, anybody else? All in favor of that motion to raise the 1,500s to 2,000, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Now, we said we were going to try to put in another line here, which talked about total number of square feet of all these commercial buildings. And for instance, Bill had suggested at one point, if the maximum in the ag rural is 3,000, that it would be 6,000. Are we ready to do that tonight, or do people want to go off and think about that? Or at least for a few more minutes? We can come back to it in 10 minutes if you want to think about it.
can't think about it and do other business at the same time unless you're more adept
Yeah.
than I am. Let's just start.
Let's start a discussion. If it turns out we have too many questions, then we'll have to table it till we've looked into it.
Okay, so I think an appropriate way of approaching this motion might be something like putting in a multiple. You know, that you might multiply the number of square footage in the first row by something.
Mhm.
So my suggestion I want to hear is, what would people think that multiple should be? What's the factor?
2.
Anyone else?
I'm
I
putting
have
in my
no-
guesses as
no
we.
idea.
Yeah, I think actually Bill's got the right idea. I think it's 2 in some in some areas.
Yeah, and
where-
I'm gonna say 3 out here, by the way, so I'm just trying to guess. So Speedsville, that's
Okay.
Oz Body Works, Brookendale Outer Snow. Now here we got to decide. I'm not, what do we think in Brookendale? So here's what I got so far as proposal. We did 2 in the ag, you can just, you guys can read across. I don't want to read for you. But now I'm stuck. This maybe should be a 2 here in Brookendale Outer.
Yes.
Yes,
And then in the center part of Brookendale, is that just a 1?
1.
1.
Yeah,
okay. So everything is 2 except for West Sladeville, which is a 1. Brooktondale Outer is a 2, and Brooktondale Center is a 1. And you're suggesting a 3 in the commercial district.
Yeah.
Discuss.
Looks good.
I'm not sure West Sladeville might be a 2.
Mm,
Talked
And-
about
and-
West Sladeville being similar to Beesmer in the
Beesmer.
Yeah.
potential.
And I mean, and that's why I did the one there. I mean, West Sladeville is a little bit of I don't know how I want to put the word, but I mean, there's a section of it that's right along Route 79 that is intensely residentially developed in small lots. And then there's a part that extends south of Route 79 that is more sort of traditional rural residential, where there's much larger
Right.
lots and has a different feel to it. But I guess in keeping with the Hamlet Beesimer equivalency, that's why I put the 1 there. But it, I know Red Barn Cabins is out there, and they can't fit pretty much in what we've said here. But of course, they will continue to exist. But you're thinking of someone like that locating there, they would have a hard time, I think, fitting in with what we put here. But I still think it's the right thing for that neighborhood.
I think just to be consistent, the way we've been treating Beesmer and West Sladeville in a similar way, and I think we might as well just do it all the way through.
Okay. All those, I'm stopping discussion right now because I'm not hearing anymore. All those in favor of that line, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes.
I
Okay,
I will go through and do the complex math and send this out later on tonight.
you are a fine human being. Okay,
I have a question.
you do, okay.
Oh, what are we doing with that note that's in blue up above, maybe only for non-residential structures, do more research? Is more research coming along, or do you want to just take that note out?
That can, yeah, I mean, that was what we were supposed to have done before this meeting. So I think, yeah, that can probably come out. Again,
Okay.
that was along the lines of, yeah, we don't need to have it all here, but I think discussion said we would keep the lot coverage in. So I think at this point, we're gonna, and
Okay,
again,
good.
that is a decision that can be. And we did change, we didn't delete the building height. We went to 40, so that note can come out as well.
Okay, great.
And then this will get unhighlighted and everything, so.
Excellent.
Good.
Okay, so I think we are actually now on to B, corner lots. So where a corner lot faces 2 principal streets, both sides shall be considered a front yard, and any front yard setbacks that may be required for the district applied, and so
Yeah.
that's no longer
I'm
relevant.
gonna stop sharing my screen and we don't
That
need
sounds
this
good.
table anymore.
Okay, yep. So that's really not as much relevant anymore, is that right? B, the corner lots thing?
I think corner lots should go in the definitions and get it out of these tables.
Okay, I think that's a great idea.
Usually dealt with under front yard, and then a corner lot has 2 front yards.
Yep.
Uh,
Let us move corner lots to definitions. I like that idea. Is that good with everyone? Front at me.
Sure.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
Okay. Net acreage and calculating density. I don't think we had anyone objecting to any of this.
Actually, we do.
We do.
Which is why my proposal was, because I think, for example, that there will be discussion of whether lands of slopes greater than 25% would indeed be excluded from buildability. But I think that that's a discussion we need to have when we discuss Article 4, General Design Standards. So my proposal, if we can all remember, oh so long, 2 weeks ago, was that language like that and the language that mentions the conservation subdivision basically have a footnote saying that this is basically to be discussed by the zoning commission. That, I'm not sure what wisdom I had last time, but
Right. Okay,
I just don't want it to be taken as a done deal, because I think it's not a done deal until the zoning commission discusses, the slopes, discusses other restrictions on buildable area, and discusses conservation subdivisions.
okay, so we'll put that footnote in there. That sounds great.
So.
Sorry, you're just deferring the
where-
discussion?
where
I
are-
don't understand, I guess.
Are we, I guess,
Um,
Bill, my sense was you're saying that we should discuss it under another section.
Yes, so again, we can have this discussion, this part of the discussion now, which is what do we do about this? I don't think we can decide whether or not net acreage subtracts lands containing slopes greater than 25%, because that discussion is a key discussion about how we treat general design standards. And I think should be handled in the context of the general design standards Article 4 discussion. On the other hand, we have a problem that here's a reference to something in the draft that we haven't gotten to yet as a zoning commission. What do we do? So my proposal is that, there be some kind of note or footnote, or we delete this part for right now and decide, I don't know quite what to do, but something to let us get this part of the draft out, Articles 1, 2, 3, plus the definitions, without having to deal with whether or not we're going to restrict building on slopes greater than 25%, because I think that's just too long a discussion to have right now.
Can I
That's me.
just add in though, that this is really not a design standard. This is to help calculate density. This is to calculate the buildable amount of space on a parcel that
Right.
relates to the density table, not to the design or the placement of things.
That's true, but that's because somewhere in the zoning law, I think Article 4, it says, and there shall be no building on slopes greater than 25%. And I know that there is sentiment on the zoning commission that that's not what they want the zoning law to say.
Yeah, but I'm not necessarily against this language in here now to calculate density as a fair and reasonable thing. I mean, I don't think we want to encourage, rampant development on over 25% lots, but I think that we do want to allow for some flexibility when people can demonstrate that they can do this responsibly. So I think
Well, then let's have this discussion, if we think we can. That seems
Yes,
reasonable.
I just want to, before you jump, I just want to add one last thing, is that this particular section does not say you can't build on 25% slope.
Right.
It says that we're
Right.
trying to come up with a sustainable level of density for a parcel that has a lot of constraints in it.
Okay, fine.
But I mean, but
Basically.
yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
adding that explanation in, but the
Well-
numbers can, change.
Okay, with that, thinking that this is about the density discussion, what do we think of number 1?
Can you say what number 1 is so we all know what you're talking about, Jean?
Number 1 says, in all districts, except as pursuant to 3.2 C2 below, density of development shall be based upon the total buildable acreage of the parcel or net acreage. Net acreage shall be calculated by subtracting acreage of lands containing slopes greater than 25% and acreage of lands included in the water resources overlay from the total parcel acreage. So for instance, if you had 15 acres, let's make it an even number. If you had 20 acres and you had 4 acres that had slopes greater than 25%, and you had 2 acres in the water resources overlay, you would take out those 6 acres in calculating your density. Is that right? Yeah.
All right, so again, I don't have a big problem because I'm not one of the ones worried about the steep slopes, but this thing defines buildable acreage by subtracting lands that have greater than 25% slope. So
Right.
that implicitly is saying we're not gonna let you build on slopes greater than 25% because we're defining buildable acres as not having that. So I find it, but I'm okay with letting it pass,
No, this is how you calculate net acreage and calculating density. It doesn't say you can't build there. It's just saying this is how you calculate it.
Then use a different word
Perfect.
phrase than total buildable acreage in the clause.
On the total net acreage?
Yeah, you can call it some, anything, but it says density development shall be based upon the total buildable acreage. And total buildable acreage is found at, so just use the word net acreage or something, not total buildable acreage. I think that's all I guess I'm really saying. I know I'm being a pain about minor words, but
It's okay.
No, I
Well,
think
it says total buildable acreage or net acreage.
Yes. It does.
Maybe just
okay.
get rid of total buildable
Good
acreage
point.
Because net
I
acreage,
think we should just leave it. And,
Just leave
and
it out total buildable acreage. I mean, I think Bill's right, you know, if it's, that's probably not even in our definition, so it's not necessary.
Let's just
I
get
think-
rid-
Net acreage.
I think to me, the most clear way is just to use net acreage. Net acreage is the total minus the constrained, and that's what you calculate density from. It gives you the net.
So I'm
I
getting rid
agree
of-
that there's confusion there, but I don't think that buildable. Yeah, I see where there's confusion.
So I'm taking away the words buildable acreage of the parcel, comma, or, and saying upon the total net acreage, and then the net acreage shall be calculated thusly.
I'm happy with that.
I
Okay,
agree.
with that, does everyone
Yeah,
say
thank you.
aye?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed, say opposed? That passes, okay. Great, number 2, do you all have this in front of you, or shall I read it?
No, what page are you reading on?
Do you want me to put it up on the screen?
Page
That would
17,
be
yes,
great,
please put it
man.
up.
Yeah, it would-
Yeah, on the original draft, it's page 17, like Jean just said.
yeah. But it would be
Huh.
helpful to see it on the screen.
Yeah,
I'm looking at my book, but
How come my draft is numbered differently than your draft?
you're probably
Yeah.
working from a different draft. It's the same draft, it was just printed differently, okay? It's the same words, different paper.
okay.
It's the secret draft.
So
Have me killed later, okay.
Who's making the changes that we're talking about? Is Jean making them or?
Uh,
I'm
well,
making them.
No,
I'm
no.
taking notes.
Yeah.
I haven't made any changes in this actual text as we've been going along.
All right,
Right.
I'm just
So-
talking about what we just discussed.
I have those notes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and Nan, do you have a clear note to take that out when you go to revise this? Is that gonna work for you, or do you need Jean to send you a summary
well,
of
I just-
decisions?
I
She
just
just
made
put
that
it-
change now, but I have notes also.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go on to number 2 then, which starts with 4 parcels of land.
So this one is a, I guess, fail-safe kind of thing, in recognizing that in number 1, we're using net acreage to calculate density. Number 2 recognizes that there may be some parcels that have a lot of steep slopes or that have a lot of land in the overlay. And so this subsection basically says, well, what do we do with those parcels? We don't want to penalize them so that they can't build. We don't want to create unbuildable parcels. So this is basically a way of saying, if you have a parcel that's 75% or more, I mean, we could change these numbers, but it's 75% or more of the parcel is covered with these constrained lands, we're gonna create a separate rule to calculate density for those parcels, so they still can get building and they still can be subdivided and built on, in recognizing that there's a lot of environmental constraints on that given parcel. So this is like a carve out for those very seriously constrained parcels.
Okay, oh, so I didn't see your bill. Bill, please
Okay,
speak.
yeah. All right, and so, yeah, so, and this is just something I just, as Nan knows, that I learned the hard way this last week as I was struggling through the water resources overlay. I think this paragraph is fine as it stands and is written. I had been at one time under the impression that you couldn't build really anywhere in the water resources overlay, and I do want to clarify, because we're going to wind up talking about this next meeting, I think, that it's not, there are areas of the water resource overlay you are allowed to build in. There are certain constrained areas within that are essentially no build zones as our draft currently proposes them. So it's a little weird to me that we subtract all of the water resources overlay area, or, you know, the way it's included in here, but I think it's okay. It's simplest. It's way easier than somehow involving the actual riparian buffer and setback zone and flood zone and all the other things. So I think this wording is good.
Okay, and
You
we're
may
gonna,
ultimately decide to change the width of the overlay. I mean, if that
Right,
gets
that's-
changed too, then that's another solution to this.
right, we're
And
gonna,
that will be discussion next time.
yeah, I'm hoping to have a small understanding about that tonight, that we can fit in. And then, but with this, Bill's understanding, if everyone is okay with this, we'll say okay to number 2. Is that right? Number 2,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, number two's okay.
Fine.
Okay,
Love it.
okay. Number 3 and last on that page, the next page over 18 is the total number of lots allowed to be created and the calculation.
And here I would just propose, again, taking the parenthetical phrase that says buildable acreage out. We'll just use the word net acreage.
Okay, yep, we'll take the build acreage out and both the second and third line.
Right.
And with that, are we all happy?
So we agree with the allowable density of 1 dwelling per 3 acres.
Well, you had, that came from
Wait.
the table.
Right, on the table, yes.
Yeah, and this is
Right.
really just a nod that you just calculate, when you have density. Density is different than lot size. So one is you use division and one you do multiplication. So that's just an explanation of how you calculate it.
Right. Okay, with that, is everyone happy with that? Say okay.
Sorry, the mathematician, because we went through this. So the mathematician in me says it's a rounding problem, right? Not a truncation.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we need to clarify, like, again, what if you have 7 acres or 8 acres, right? 7 acres gets 2 lots, 8 acres gets 3 lots, is my understanding.
Right,
That's
so
correct.
Does the rounding?
So do we
rationale
say,
get put in here?
yeah, so do we need to add something about rounding or,
Can we have that in the definitions tables?
It might be just easier right
Here?
here where you're telling people
Yeah.
how it's calculated to just say.
I
what
think this
you
is where it should
do.
be. Yes, I think
Okay.
it should be right here.
So what we're gonna say is a 1 dwelling per 3 acres, the calculation by dividing the net acreage by the minimum lot size for that district and rounding to the nearest whole number.
Well, yeah, sure. Excellent.
Okay, mathematics is now satisfied. Pascal is happy and we are all dancing. Everyone say okay.
Okay,
Okay.
Okay. Hurrah. Okay, we now have density bonuses. And which are sections D and E in here and methods to achieve community benefits. Let's put those up and people should read these. Did we have many comments? We had a few comments on these areas. So let's talk about the theory of density bonuses so people understand why we're talking about this.
You want me to give a little background? Was that a yes?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I think we
Yeah.
Yeah.
didn't-
split
Hi,
out
ma'am.
this thing. So the notion behind the density bonus is it's kind of like we give you something for giving us something. So the state authorizes local communities to offer incentives. So the incentive is we're gonna give you extra density. So let's say in the ag rural district and you calculated using the 1 dwelling per 3 acre density, let's say it gives you 5 dwellings. I'm just pulling a number out of the hat.
Sure.
What the density bonus does is it says, if you provide something that's of value to the town, we're going to incentivize you to do that by giving you additional units or additional dwellings that you can put up. So where you normally would get 5, maybe you'll get 8 in turn for giving any one of these amenities. So permanent open space that's beyond the conservation subdivision 50%, providing public access, maybe there's public access to the creek for getting your canoe or kayak in. Green energy initiatives, that's building buildings to lead energy standards, or providing other renewable energy, solar, roof mounted or solar shingles or whatever. Providing affordable senior housing. So it's basically saying, these are things that are of value to the town. And we would like to encourage these types of things to happen. And we're going to encourage these things by giving you a little extra amount of density. So it's usually, these things are usually applied in larger developments, not for a single family home that's, one dwelling on 5 acres. They don't really, that's not the kind of development that would typically even consider a density bonus, but it's there for multifamily dwellings, communities that would be kind of like your Boyceville cottages, X number of units that you would get from the density table, but you get a bonus by dedicating a certain percentage of them for affordable senior housing. So it's not something that I think you're going to use a lot. Some communities have a density bonus in their zoning and it's never been used, but it's kind of a nod to recognizing that, the town has some things that you value and you're willing to give more density as an incentive to make those happen should that kind of development ever come up in town. I know that there were some comments made early on about it'll never be used, or we don't have that kind of development in the town, so why have it? I think it's really more of a philosophy about whether at some point, that someone might come to town with another kind of Boyceville cottage type development or a multifamily development. They'd like to get 30 units instead of 25 units, and that, we'll dedicate 5% of those units for affordable senior housing. So I have no issues with this not being used. It takes up some pages, but it's there as an incentive program should you want it. So that's basically, so the first part lays out what the incentives are. And then the second part are the procedures on how the bonuses are going to be given. And this is reflecting how the state authorizing legislation requires bonuses to be given. So they're not just given out willy-nilly, and you have to be able to prove that your parcel has the capacity to take that extra density. So there's all of these procedures that you see down through here flow from the state law that says how density bonuses should be given out. And it's usually a town board. It's not a review board. So basically you're changing the parameters of the zoning. So it's usually the density bonuses are approved by the town board. Not that you can't review these, but these are the processes needs to be consistent with the state law. So I think the big question is, do you want these? And if you do, what are the incentives that you want to give? In what level of incentive? These could be raised. I have a community out in central New York that is desperate for affordable housing, and they have offered, like double and triple the amount of density that would be available under certain circumstances. So you can make these numbers whatever. I just started these off as something that I thought was a place to start. So I think you need to decide whether you like the technique, want the technique, and if you do, what do you want to incentivize and by how much?
I got a question. Didn't you say that these were state that tells you?
No, The state tells you what the process for giving a density bonus would be.
Okay,
In other words,
It's
in
not mandatory. You don't have to give a density bonus if you don't want to, but if you do offer a density bonus, it has to meet the process that the state lays out for issuing density bonuses.
so the town would have to develop the percentages and. what
Yes.
was what.
If you have a density bonus section in your zoning, you have to identify what the bonus is and how much bonus you're giving.
So I want to just point out that our job is to bring to the community and then to the town board our best ideas of what we think should be considered. It's up to the town board what's in it or out of it when they finally make a decision. If, you know, they could reject the entire thing, they could take parts, they could leave this out, they could put it in. What we're doing here is saying, what do we think makes sense? I like the idea of density bonuses, and I particularly like the idea because I think of affordable housing. I think we need a definition for affordable housing, which I would recommend be 30% of income, which is sort of the accepted federal definition. That doesn't go above, you know, that you don't use more than 30% of your total income on housing, though many people in the country are now spending 50% of their income on housing. And we know that housing is an enormous crisis in our county. So that's the reason that I think it's an interesting idea. What do other people think? Bill and I can't see. Barb, I either can see my book or I can see the screen. That's
Yeah.
how it is. Yeah.
I had up early on just because I also want to speak in favor of the density bonuses. It's sort of the carrot rather than the stick approach. And so I think it's very worthwhile. And basically I would propose that we accept this as written because I don't have a particular decision to up some of the percentages, but that's, I think, open for discussion, obviously. Except in section D, paragraph 2, it refers to the planning board. That should be the review board.
Where are you reading?
Right in the, go up, not to the, you have 2 Ds, by the way, but under higher up, yep, there you go. Under section 2 incentive,
here.
yeah, it's just a simple typo, you know. We're strange in Caroline. We have a review board, not a planning board that does this kind of thing. And then you answered my main question already, which is it's the procedures, which is also section D, but should probably be section E. Talked about the town board. I thought that should be the review board, but I now understand from what you said, Nan, that that's why, because of state law. So I am fine with that. So that is basically, I'm speaking in favor of this as written. I think it's something we might modify in the next draft after there's been some more time for community feedback. Because I feel like right now I'd just be grasping at straws to change any numbers. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think I would like a little time to read it a little more and digest it. Just because I think it is our job to bring something to the board. And like you said, just accepting these numbers, I would like to read them over a little bit more.
Okay, well, correct. I have read the numbers and they seem fine to me, but I'm also willing to be educated by the public. So I say accept them as written, as opposed to pushing this off. I'm happy to take this language as written.
Well,
I agree. I agree.
Just looking at them kind of really roughly, you know, it's just like, for instance, under public access or recreational uses, up to a 10% increase. So, you know, basically you're going to have 10 lots minimum for that to even apply. So you can get one more lot. So, you know, very clearly this is not going to be applicable to the vast majority of the development in the town. So my real question is just whether or not we're adding some level of complexity that we really don't need or warrant, and it's just going to jeopardize the whole document because it's just more, you know, 3 more pages of stuff. That's my only downside. I like the idea. I think that, you know, the amounts of bonus and on the basis of what can be argued from here until the cows come home, but this seems, you know, not at all unreasonable. I just wonder if it's the right thing.
Michelle, Barb?
Yeah, I'm concerned about the complexity of it. And I'm concerned that I don't recall that we ever had our conversation about conservation subdivisions. And my concern is that both of those concepts, the density bonuses and conservation subdivisions, are somewhat complicated. And I'd be much more in favor of relying on conservation subdivisions to accomplish some of the environmental and resource protection goals that we had in mind. But I do like the idea of density bonuses for affordable or senior housing. So I guess I'm wondering if to simplify things a bit, we can rely on conservation subdivisions for the environmental and resource protection elements, and edit the density bonuses section down to pertain to the goal of promoting affordable or senior housing.
Bill?
So, yeah, I agree. So, the example that Nan gives is for someone with a 10-acre parcel that they can go from 3 to 4 dwelling units, which might make a big difference for someone like that. Now, to get that, they had to do a couple different density bonuses. So I guess I'm going to say this doesn't just pertain really to conservation subdivisions. The two are definitely two different things. It will definitely come into play with the conservation subdivision. That's one of our few, that the big subdivision does that. But it does pertain to certain kinds of smaller subdivisions that might occur in this town. So having said that, I guess I would tend to keep all the different levels in, because that allows someone with just a 10-acre thing to do a couple different things, like maybe one affordable housing unit, and then I'll do energy efficiency here, and now I get to build an extra house. So I'm going to vote that we keep it. As complex as it is, I guess personally, I'm sort of with Nan, it adds a few pages on the 100 and some pages. I don't think that's a major stumbling block. Personally, that's how I view it. And I think that where we more likely run afoul of losing the whole enterprise is on more controversial elements. This I don't think is very controversial, because it's like, sure, you can, again, it's a carrot, not a stick. And we're more likely to have problems that would cause us problems with where there are sticks in the document. So I'm okay with this as is.
Where are you reading the 10-acre?
In her reader's aid boxes, and
Aid
Nan gives an
box?
example. The reader's aid box on page 20 at the top discusses how someone with a 10-acre lot can do something. Normally they would get 3 lots, but in this particular person, the case, she gives an example of someone who set aside a wetland area, got a 10% bonus, and then put up 3 of the houses with solar panels to get a 25% bonus. Total 35% bonus. This means they get, instead of having 3 houses, they get to have 4 houses. So at any rate, that was what I was referring to.
Gotcha.
Okay, I think everyone has spoken except Michelle.
I guess, I don't think I know enough about the stuff to like weigh in with a lot of intelligence, but I'm willing to like let it stand and see what kind of comments we get, and go on from there. I think these are good things to promote. I agree with most of what Bill said. So yeah, I'm willing to let it stand.
Okay, with that, the idea of accepting the density bonuses that's part D, and part E, the procedures, which says D in there now, if you're making notes. And then part F, methods to achieve, which now says E, and we're changing to F.
So you're all the way to part F?
Yeah, because it's all about the density bonuses, all of it.
Yeah, Bruce, it's all of the last several pages of this article. So it's pages 19, 20, and 21, and 22.
Okay, that's what I was looking for, the page numbers. Gotcha.
So with that, all of those who would agree to leave this way, and we get it to if we put it into the second draft and we have a public hearing and see what people say about it, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. That passed.
So, right, so Gene, since we've reached the end, one last thing, and I don't, again, I sent this out in an email, but of course I don't have it in front of me. Somewhere in Article 3, the word conservation subdivision still appears, and maybe it was in the table. I think we decided to take it out of the table, and so maybe I did do that.
I think you did.
Okay, and the question is there anywhere else in that article that the word the phrase conservation subdivision appears? I thought it was in some footnote. I have not been able to find it as during this meeting. Because again, we have not decided about conservation subdivisions. And if that phrase is there, we just
Right.
need to do something to gracefully say, we are going to discuss this and this could change.
We will, we will do a document word search and see if we can find it.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
and bring that back to you by email. With that, I believe we have, we approved Article 1 a long time ago with changes, Article 2 with changes, Article 3 with changes now. We need to talk about terminology. I don't think we have enough time to do all of that tonight. There are two other things, though, I do want to do. I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about the water resources overlay and the ag district overlay, and then just finish up. So Bill has done a lot on the water resources overlay this week with Nan, because we've had some questions, and which we have a written answer, which will probably go out very soon up onto the written answers. But you want to talk about that a little bit, Bill?
Sure, and I think I'll share that same image that I sent you
Yes.
as an example. Okay, so we'll talk more generally about the water resource. So the water resources overlay, right, identifies critical, it's the water resources and flooding overlays, the official name, right? And it identifies critical water resources that merit protection in the town and also flooded areas. So the main components have to do with wetlands and streams and riparian areas. The requirements vary a little bit, whether it's a perennial stream or an intermittent stream, but basically they're trying to protect the area, the riparian area, that's the area near the stream bed. And then of course flood zones. And there were various parameters used to build the actual overlay, and it was things like, of course, the wetlands, but if it's a DEC regulated wetland, it's also a 100-foot buffer around that because that's what DEC regulates. If it was other wetlands, it took a 50-foot buffer just because there was the idea was that the overlay should be a bit larger than the actual thing being protected in some sense. That's one rationale for that. So that you just know if you're close, and then you take a really careful look if buildings are proposed close to that. That's what the overlay triggers, is that review. And for a perennial stream, there's a protection area that is called a riparian buffer, and you can probably not read these words here. It says riparian buffer. So this is a particular picture of 6 Mile Creek going through Slaterville Springs. So my cursor is running around 6 Mile Creek here, the dark green. The 50 feet, as it currently is in our draft regulations, is called the riparian buffer, and that's a protected area. And then the next 50 feet out from that is called the setback area. It has a somewhat different set of protections, but is also a protected area. But then the parameters used to construct the overlay say that 200 feet from the edge, from the bank of 6 Mile Creek, is where the edge of the overlay is. So that's this white line out here. So this is a visual representation of the fact that the overlay itself is larger than, in some sense, the actual protected areas. There's also a flood zone, and I wasn't sure, I didn't have the mapping of what the flood zone area, the 100-year floodplain area is. It's going to be somewhere in here, I think. Rick could certainly plot that up for us if we needed to.
And Bill, that's just been released, the new version, I believe.
Okay, and it has the new 100-year flood maps in it or whatever. And again,
Yep.
Okay, Rick could map that. Okay, so if there were a wetland, for example, there could be a wetland over here, and the overlay area would be, again, if it's a DEC one, 100 feet outside the actual boundary of the wetland. There are a lot of wetlands in the town, so there are three sources of wetland information. Basically, the county has mapped a lot of wetlands. There's also something called the National Wetlands Inventory that the federal government has kept. And then the DEC has its list of wetlands, and to be regulated by the DEC, they have to be 12.4 acres and larger. So that's all the complexity of wetland stuff. But basically the county has mapped all the wetlands. And what I learned, again, the hard way 3 different times from Nan this week is it does not matter how big the wetland is or whether it's mapped somewhere, the federal government protects all wetlands. And then on top of that, our state protects wetlands 12.4 acres and larger. Okay, that's background information that those wetland areas, those floodplain areas, and various distances like 200 feet from the edge of 6 Mile Creek, or maybe it's 100 feet from a different perennial stream, is the boundary of the wetlands and water resources zone and flooding overlay. I want us to think hard about the overlay edge between now and say next meeting. And this region in Sladeville Springs is one of the reasons why that is. Because remember, anywhere inside the wetland, water resources and flooding overlay triggers abbreviated site plan review for pretty much any kind of building or anything you want to do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a 1 meeting short review. But if you look, because of the way our Caroline is, 6 Mile Creek runs just about 200 feet off of Route 79. And no surprise, there's a lot of houses along the edge of Route 79. So if this buffer edge is out here, all these houses around here, if they want to add, I assume Nan can confirm, but I think if they want to add a deck or almost anything, they have to go through abbreviated site plan review. Again, not a huge burden, but it is something new to the town that you have to do something besides get a building permit to do anything. And there's no reason a priori to say that the overlay edge should be out here. It could be closer to these actual protected zones if we wanted them to. In other words, this is a decision that the zoning commission makes. It's a question of how much sort of buffer slop do you want to, before you trigger abbreviated site plan reviews, that you make sure that someone is either getting the wetlands permit or is out of the setback area or whatever. And it might make sense to bring this buffer edge in somewhere into here so that, for example, the fire hall and a bunch of these properties along here are less impacted or not. Maybe we don't want to move it. So that was the thing for us to think hard about is that.
That overlay, Bill, is both sides of the stream, isn't it?
Yes, so I did not mention that. Yes, so I was drawing this again, Rick in a snap of his fingers can make maps of us. I was laboriously drawing this in Google Earth last night. So I did on one side of the stream. But yeah, there's a mirror image. There's a similar yellow line 50 feet out on this side, a pink line on this side, and a white line down here. They're important, but again, there's a lot more structures in between the stream, the creek, and Route 79.
Well, I'm thinking
elsewhere. Yeah, go on.
Brooktondale would be really affected if it has a.
That's a good point, and I haven't looked at that. There may well that same thing may pertain, but there may be that pretty much all the houses are quite close to the creek there, and so many of them are probably within this 100 feet of protected areas. So it's not there. It's not so much the thickness of the riparian buffer and of the setback area are in Article 4 that we haven't gotten to yet. Those are taken from the county recommended numbers, and those are science-based numbers. In some sense, this overlay edge, I don't want to say it's not science-based, it's Nan judgment-based, which exceeds science, but it is a question that it's sort of a safety factor. It's a judgment call. It's something that we can decide, right? Could be a smaller thing. Whereas I would want to look much harder at, okay, why did the county say 50 feet the riparian buffer? Nan's already told me it's okay if you want to make this distance between the actual protected zone and the overlay edge smaller. She's already told me that would be okay if we wanted to do that. So that's why I was focusing on that one. But yeah, we might even make these other areas smaller or larger, depending on how choices we make down the road. But for right now, it was just how much essentially slop outside the protected areas do we feel we need to include at this stage? Because that sets not what's protected, but that sets what the map looks like that we're about to release sometime in the next few weeks.
And we cannot change those other areas.
What do you mean? We could change the distance of the riparian buffer in the setback area. We could certainly change that. Those are not state law. Those are proposed distances in our zoning law. Different is wetlands, which the zoning law does not actually promote. It does not have any additional regulations or restrictions on wetlands beyond those that exist in existing state and federal law. So we can't affect the fact that DEC wants a 100-foot buffer on its wetlands. That's state law. We can't affect that. But the riparian buffers and the setback area was a proposed ordinance by the Tompkins County that municipalities are adopting and that could be adjusted. I think their numbers are wise and based on good science. But again, I say I'm really bringing up the question of the overlay edge.
So let me talk about the wetlands idea. So we could reduce these or enlarge these, but if somebody's house where they wanted to put a deck happened to have a wetland, or they wanted to build an addition, happened to have a wetland right behind it. And the way I understand it is that's generally determined by plants. And somebody comes and looks at your property and says, this is a wetland because you have British soldiers growing, which is a plant. So, then you can't build there because it's in a wetland. Is that correct?
So now we'll give you the full answer, but pretty much. So what that means though is you got a wetland. That means you've got to contact the appropriate agency that has jurisdiction. So the first step that either the builder or the landowner has to do is figure out which agency has jurisdiction. And
Right.
around here, it's almost certainly going to be either DEC or the Army Corps of Engineers. There are cases where it's the EPA or the Soil Conservation Service, or, but generally it's going to be Army Corps or DEC. And it will be DEC if it's 12.4 acres or larger, and Army Corps of Engineers if it's smaller.
Okay.
Then what you have to do and what you can't do depends on what they say. So the Army Corps might say, oh, if you do X, Y, and Z, we'll give you a permit to put that deck there. Or they might say, no, you can't step foot in that wetland.
Okay,
And-
and that's whether or not there's zoning. That's regardless. That's how it is.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
the
right.
way
That's clear to people. Thank you. We will talk.
And again,
about
that is whether or not that wetland appeared in any map, whether or not, it's just, yeah, if it's there, that's what happens.
Right, okay, so we will discuss this when we next meet. Bill can send this map out to people for people to look at. Nan, is there anything you want to add to what Bill has said?
No, I think he covered most of it. I do want to add though that wetlands are delineated not just by plants, but by wetness in the soil types. So it's not just whether there's, cattails or something there. So it's a little more complicated than just by looking at the plants.
No one's gonna come and ask me to make the determination, thank the good Lord.
So is this overlay map somewhere for the whole town of Caroline?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, not what Bill
Well,
did, but you have
right.
previously been given an overlay map that we did.
Right,
And
So-
for the next, so to that point though, for the next public information session, it would be useful to have that map on a whatever, bigger, larger scale, whatever it is that lets people see it better. Okay, so maybe zoomed in views by the hamlets as well as a town-wide view, which is I think what we have right now.
right, and also, as Tim just reminded us, I know that the flood zone maps I know for the city of Ithaca have been released, and I think for the entire county. So, Nan, I'll talk with you tomorrow about, we should have Rick look at those, because they are
Yep.
new. They're just
Yep.
bandy. In fact, a lot of the city is even more of the city is in the flood zone than used to be. Which is most of the city, so here you are.
I think, Bill, we haven't decided on that line yet, but when we do decide on the line, I believe it would be good to have a map of the whole 6 Mile Creek with
Yes.
those delineated on it.
I'm
show
I'm
it.
gonna, yeah, we have that, and we're gonna ask, Bill, we're gonna ask that to be updated with this,
Okay.
with the new, and so we'll all look at that and try to get that out before we meet again the next time. So there's that, and then the other thing we wanted to discuss is the ag overlay that we have also discussed, which is prime, I'm getting this wrong. Prime soils? No. Prime farmland? Prime farmland. And not that we really want to do that much with this, but we don't actually want to say, you know, you have to farm here, you can't farm there. What we want to have is a map that says to people, you may not farm, but you should know that this is good farmland. I think that that's what we're trying to obtain. Is that my sense? Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the easy part is prime farmland and prime farmland if drained.
Right.
And my proposal had been that whatever else met some definition of really good farmland be included. And then you should subtract out land that's not available for farming, for instance, because 10 houses around it. That is that, yes, there's a lot of prime farmland under Slaterville Springs and Brooktondale, but it's silly to map that as a farmland overlay because that's not going to be farmed. So it really is, the intent is the best remaining farmland that is available for farming, with the goal of making it still available for farming into the future. My sense of email discussion is that the steps that would be required to actually make that protection real are not something this commission favors. But at any rate, that was my intent. I only put out prime farmland and prime farmland if drained because that was an easy thing to map. Again, I would subtract out urbanized areas. And as you all knew, punted a certain decision onto the agricultural committee of the town to identify other good farmlands. And you probably saw the exchange with Barbara and I over whether that was a good idea or not. And, you know, it's probably a political, to some extent, you know, decision that could be quantified in some way. But again, I always had left it if they got back to us in time for the public hearing, because I did not necessarily want to hang on that information coming back.
Right. So I think, Michelle, I see your hand up.
Yeah, this might be a dumb question. I have a question about the prime farmland if drained. Are those the same thing as wetlands? Like, are all wetlands, if you drain them, they'd be prime farmland, or how do you distinguish? No?
It's based
So-
on the soil. It's based on the soil survey and the characteristics of the soil. So
Okay.
a wetland that would have wet soils or hydric soils wouldn't have even when they were drained, wouldn't necessarily have the same characteristics as a prime farmland soil. So, you know, the drainage is not talking about draining a wetland
Mhm.
dry. It's really talking about putting in drainage tiles through a field that would drain, you know, larger areas. So generally wetlands have a different category of soils that would be like called hydric soils.
Yeah, we have a lot of those up around, my neighbor has been talking about it.
Yeah.
So-
And these are designations that we don't just, you know, pull out of a hat. These are definitions and soil determinations made by the state and the federal soil inventory. So these are mapped and known and identified as, you know, having particular characteristics suitable for productive agriculture.
Okay,
So now just to follow up on that, so because I've never looked at the two maps overlaid, so obviously prime farmlands, if drained, are not in general wetlands, but do you know if any of them are a wetland?
Not anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So.
Yeah, I would have to have Rick kind of go
Okay.
through that a little more carefully to see if
Okay.
any of those were hydric soils, but
Okay, and it was more idle curiosity, but you know, so let's not waste his time.
Okay, so we are going to ask though that Rick make this map, this ag map for us.
oh,
Are we? I wasn't
Oh.
convinced many on the zoning commission had any interest in this.
No, okay, I just wanted to check. Is that, where are we? No?
I-
Yes?
I'll just say, I have an interested in it. I think it's really important information. I'm just, I'm not sure I agree that we should make an overlay that's part of the zoning plan at this time, but if there's a way we can use this information in other ways, I think would be.
Well, then we're not gonna ask him now. We'll see as we go through this if there's anything else. We are gonna
Yeah.
ask him to make this,
Uh,
I thought
Those
we
as
already sent out a map that showed
Right.
prime if drains map. I think we already have that done.
I
Yeah,
think
that present, the difference would be to subtract out the things that in your, but I'm not sure he should or shouldn't. I should have a little more zoning, but that would be, what the overlay would actually be, would be the map we have to see, which is not just the prime farmland and prime farmland drain, but it's that set minus the parts that we aren't ever going to farm again. That would be the overlay in my mind, and I do not know if people want to see that map or not.
I think,
I'd like to see it.
anybody else?
I want to say, I just want to say that, in looking at the maps that we have, I think there's a big discrepancy between areas that are actively being farmed now and what those maps show. And I just think
Yes.
Yes,
I think there'd be kind of a concept of the agricultural resources overlay, but I don't know that we're ready to create that out of the information that we have right now.
So Ernie, that this is where I differ from you on this, and I think it's a good point you bring up. But again, I was intentionally trying to not base it on what's currently being farmed, because that's sort of like saying, well, these should always be farmed, which I think is not
But it
a
should
statement.
include but it should include it. right?
Only if, under some criteria, and I don't know what those criteria should be. That's why I was letting the ag committee make that decision. Just because you happen to still be farming now doesn't mean that it's the better farmland left in Caroline. It probably does, but I don't know that without some yield
Well,
measure or something else.
I know that in the
And I don't want to
property
sentence.
from me, which is actively farmed, the line runs right down the middle of this big field. And as far as I can tell, the sides of the field are absolutely identical. I
Right.
mean, there's no rhyme or reason to
Yeah.
it.
So that would be a great property for the ag committee to say, hey, include all of this property in your
Well,
overlay.
That's exactly it. And so that's what I think, I don't think we have the map that we can say, this is what we need to preserve. I think that we have a map that says, these are the things that we are pretty sure that we want to preserve. And there are other things as well. And your development should address all of those things if it can. But we can't do much more than ask that.
okay,
Well,
and
I think one of the things that the zoning commission should consider is in looking at the draft zoning as a whole and whether it adequately addresses agriculture and whether through the development process that it lays out, you have adequately addressed protection of farms and ability to allow farms to keep going. I mean, I think the fundamental question is in looking at, we have agriculture peppered throughout this draft zoning in some form or another, whether it's through conservation subdivision, whether it's through the seeker form when you do a site plan review and it asks you whether there are any prime farmland soils and impacts on agriculture. So I think you have to take it as a whole. The overlay for agriculture is just one method of getting at protecting and promoting agriculture. So I think you have to look at whether the current draft adequately does that, and you need other things to get at that fundamental policy.
that's a very good point. Thank you. I think it really is a good point.
Looking at the old maps, I looked at them about a week ago, and they were clearly old, but they were, stated prime farmland, or ag land. And it also, a couple of them had houses, so it was very easy to distinguish what land wasn't going to be farmed.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, there's prime farmland drain. There's also a lot of farmland of statewide importance, which we looked at maps in the past. And, a lot, 80%, I don't know, 70% of Caroline is farmland of statewide importance. And that's why some of that stuff, like Ernie's talking about, probably there's the prime farmland, and right next to it is a bunch of farmland of statewide importance. But if we try to protect all of that, I didn't think farmland of statewide importance was a good criterion to use, because at that point you're talking all of Caroline, and again, that doesn't really make sense in terms of a zoning plan. As I wrote in the one email, the thing about what we have in our zoning code, and this is okay, but a lot of what's going to happen in terms of protecting farmland is triggered by something like site plan review.
Right.
And site plan review is great. It's a very useful thing, and it would be great if someone, if subdivision review has something similar, which it probably does, and the big subdivision goes in, great, that will get triggered, and we can look at them mapping active farmland as well as the prime farmland, all that sort of stuff. But what is happening more than anything else is that there's a couple 100 acres of farmland, like I think pretty much just happened over the last couple of years on White Church Road. Farmers getting older and decided to do it anymore. They don't have offspring that are doing it or whatever. They don't find a buyer for it. And then it gets divided up into 10 to 20 acre lots. And once you've done that and put 6 houses on that, it's not going to go back to farmland. And site plan won't touch that because that doesn't get triggered. Subdivision won't touch that because it doesn't get triggered. So all I want to point out, I'm not saying we have to do this, but I mean, if you really want to do something preserving farmland, it takes steps that would be very different from what have been done in Caroline. And I agree that that's probably a step too far, but let's just not say, oh, site plan's can really protect this stuff. It's not going to affect 90+% of the development that winds up impacting this good farmland over the next 20 years. Numbers pulled totally out of the top of my head. So that's my concern, is that, if we're serious about preserving good farmland so that the grandchildren of the current farmers that move back into town can buy that land and farm on it, we aren't taking any steps to do that. If we're trying to preserve some good farmland so that 20 or 30 years from now, when California has no water to grow any crops, and it's gotten warm enough now that we can have a longer season and grow better crops in New York, that land's going to be on our houses and we can't do it. So if it's a community value to protect that farmland, to preserve it for 30 years from now, then we got to step on some toes today. I'm not getting the sense that people are all that willing to do that. I don't blame you. I'm not sure I'm willing to do that. So sure, we'll leave in what we've got, but then I don't think there's any reason for farmland overlay. That's mine.
Okay, I am going to say that I want to do 3 other things and then we need to adjourn by 9:30. So I'm going to ask people to really think about what we just discussed and be prepared to talk about it at the next time we meet. Secondly, I think that we can easily get through the definitions in our next meeting and then be prepared to say that we are going to schedule our public information meeting and put up the draft 2. I said before that what the public information meeting would cover is Articles 1, 2, and 3, and the definitions. I think the question that we have, and I will probably send you a lot of this stuff this week, is how do we have a public information meeting? I think in all likelihood, we will have Nan again present at the beginning, and that we will figure out ways to get questions from the audience and get those questions answered without that taking, the rest of our natural lives. And then asking people to send us notes, put things up on boards, all that kind of stuff. The hard thing that we have to contend with, I think, right now is, as you know, we're having another small spike of COVID going through the community. Happily, not lots of people are ending up in the hospital, but lots of people are getting COVID. And for some people, that's a very serious issue. So I will think about that this week and try to send you out some ideas. The biggest public space that we've got is the Brooksondale Fire Hall. We had it before. We could again do one on Zoom and one there. Really have to talk about that. So that would mean that we would have some kind of a public meeting, I would think in the mid-May area. Because our next meeting is on April 26th. If we can get this draft up and posted by May 1st, we could have it after the 14th, somewhere in the next 4 or 5 days. So that's my goal. Is that good with everyone?
And I
Right.
would just ask, just a procedural kind of thing is, so let's say at the end of your meeting next week, you make whatever changes you're gonna make to the definitions. Doesn't the zoning commission though, so then I'll make the edits. Doesn't the zoning commission then want to see it as a whole before you go to the public? It seems that there's a missing step in there.
You're probably right. I think maybe what we should do is have an extra meeting, because I do think time is moving, and, you know, we're getting to the end of May when lots of people head out of town. And I don't want to miss that. So I think that we'll talk about an extra meeting, and I will send out a note about that. Bill, I see your hand up, and I see Barb's up. I saw Barb's first and then Bill.
Yeah, Barb first.
Yeah, I think the point was already made. I just want to advocate that, that the zoning commission reads carefully for typos as well as, omissions from our discussions, any set of documents before they get shared with the public from this next round of discussion. I just want to be very clear about that.
Absolutely. I just left it out. Bill?
All right. Point in particular, Nan, I don't know where you're at, but the text of Articles 1, 2, and 3 is clear for you to work on. I don't know if you have worked on it yet.
I haven't yet, but
Right.
I will, yeah.
So what would be, again, it must be just an easy lift for you, but if the sooner we can get that draft from you, we don't have to wait till April 26th to get
Right.
that draft from you. As soon as you get the words of those done, like in particular for Article 2, we've now got a different Hamlet than you had before, right? So you got to write a new description of that or whatever.
Right.
So as soon as you can give us text, that would be great. And then if we get the definitions and approve those at the next meeting and then have a few days to review those, that's fine. But we need a bunch of time on the other text, I think. So
Yeah. Good. And I think we've gotten a lot of feedback about the terminology. I need to go in and add a few notes, and I thought of a couple of other things that I wanted to put in. So I will send those along. If you have any of those kinds of ideas of other terms that need to be in there, for instance, I thought about affordability tonight. We should define that since it's a word in there. Send those along. With that, I want to thank everyone for all the work they did this last week and the couple of weeks. We're moving ahead. Michelle, I see your hand up.
Oh, I just want, which version are we commenting on? I was looking at Ernie's edits, but I'm just not sure if we were to comment, would it be on Ernie's version or?
Yeah.
What?
Let's do it on Ernie's at this point, and let's see if we can manage to merge them. I think we probably could merge them. So if you're reading them tomorrow, do that, and otherwise I'll see if I can manage to merge the two of them together. I think I can.
Yeah, because I had to just download it. I wasn't able to change it from the read-only copy to, in other words, I've just got my own version of Ernie's version that I'm looking at.
Okay.
Like I'm not getting anybody else's comments on it. So is
If
there
I
a way?
can,
Yeah.
let me see if I can manage to make that work tomorrow.
Okay.
all right. I mean, it could be a Google Doc, which would help us all see things, or it has to be a one-way street where we all comment on things and send to Nan. I'm not sure what the smartest thing
I'm
is.
I'm trying to put it up as a Google Doc that, and include the comments, which I seem to be technologically challenged with, which I'm blaming on my gray
Jean-
hair. Yep,
Jean,
Tim,
Jean, can you just clarify for everyone when the next meeting is? It's the 26th, I believe, right?
that is correct. It's the 26th. And I think I heard, was that Bruce I heard?
Jean, Bruce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have had a real hard time getting on your Google Docs. So I'll have to get a hold of you, I guess, and try to figure that one out.
You have to send me a thing saying you can't get on, and then I will grant you permission.
Okay,
And then I can do it, but I did grant you permission, but I know that was the same problem Michelle had. I don't know why, because,
Well, I did that thing and then the next time I checked, I was able to get on. So you don't get a note. It says that you'll be notified. I never get a notification, but once I ask for permission, if I try it like the next day, I'm able to get in usually.
because then I get the note and then it says, and I grant it, but I already sent you a thing granting you permission, so I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
I don't have any, I'm able to get onto the Google Docs. I'm not having any problems, but I guess Bruce can't, so.
Okay,
So I'll send it back again. Thank
okay,
you.
that sounds great. Thank you, everyone. I think we are adjourned.
Okay.
Okay.
So moved.
Night, everyone. Thank you, Nan.
Yep.
Okay.